Hello, this is again Dr. Jonathan Bentwich. Um, I'm glad to have another presentation about this new God's physics, a new scientific paradigm for the 21st century, published by iUniverse, by myself, Jonathan Bentwich, PhD. And I want to talk today about this exciting major breakthrough in physics and in science more generally. This is obviously both the book itself and these lectures that I'm giving are intended for the general public, for the layman reader. So I'm going to try and make the presentation as simple as possible. Today I'm going to talk about the major scientific breakthrough brought by this new God's physics paradigm for 21st century physics and more generally for 21st century science. So what I want to talk about is first explain in simple terms where science stands right now, where physics stands right now, and essentially what major breakthrough does this new God's physics, or it's called also the computational unified field theory, how does this new God's physics paradigm, which is considered the new paradigm for 21st century physics, how does this new paradigm resolve the problem, the major crisis that exists in 20th century physics and science more generally, and what major breakthrough it produces in science. Maybe let's begin with one of the two greatest scientists the world has ever known, Albert Einstein, who over 100 years ago set on a very bold and singular journey towards discovering what he called the unifying field theory. Essentially, Einstein, who discovered relativity theory, which is considered to be the greatest intellectual achievement, intellectual discovery or work carried out, accomplished by one single human being. Relativity theory talks about the macroscopic universe, the Big Bang, supposedly that the universe was created by an initial nuclear event, the expansion, the accelerated expansion of the universe, the galaxies, Einstein's equations, his relativity theory talks about the macroscopic universe. The problem is that the other theory that Einstein began and other scientists joined in, and Einstein was not 100% satisfied with the result, but that's the other theory, quantum mechanics, which he began and other scientists joined in, is a theory of the old paradigm of 20th century physics, relativity theory about the macroscopic universe, quantum mechanics about the microscopic universe. And these two theories, the two pillars of the old, what I call material causal physics or paradigm of 20th century physics, these two models collide. They're inconsistent. To make it simple, relativity theory postulates that nothing in the universe can travel faster than the speed of light. And I give this example: if God forbid the sun would be extinguished, the last ray of light from the sun to planet Earth, to our own planet, would take about 8 minutes. And so we would not know about this event, God forbid, for 8 minutes. If we were to take an equivalent situation in quantum mechanics, there's a phenomenon known as quantum entanglement. If we were to take an equivalent situation where two entangled particles that were conjoined and shared certain properties, and then they fly away, and now they're separated also by 8 minutes of light traveling signal distance. So if we measure one of those particles, entangled particles, according to quantum mechanics and the quantum entanglement phenomena, which was validated empirically, so if we make a measurement in one of those entangled particles, instantaneously the other particle will also be affected. We are determining the properties of the other entangled particle by the first entangled particle. So that seems to violate the speed of light barrier which is restricted by relativity theory. And so this is one of the examples where relativity theory and quantum mechanics are inconsistent. Einstein, again, actually preceded his generation. He had a vision. He foresaw that this situation, that the relativity theory about the macroscopic universe, quantum mechanics about the microscopic universe, the subatomical realm, they cannot contradict each other because they're describing the same reality, the same universe. So Einstein set as early as 1919, 100 years ago, on a journey to find that unifying field theory. Other scientists ridiculed him, unfortunately, and they didn't see his vision. He preceded his generation, no doubt, time and again. Many of his discoveries are being awarded a Nobel Prize many years after his passing in 1955. And so he preceded his generation. He had a vision, and he saw that these two theories, relativity theory and quantum mechanics, they must be united. They cannot violate each other. They cannot negate each other. And biographers tell us that even on his deathbed, Einstein was scribbling equations, trying to find that unifying field theory. Great scientist, no doubt. And so what we find is that, and then, by the way, many scientists, as I said, ridiculed Einstein, even said he lost his genius, which obviously he didn't. He preceded his generation. But then today, over the last 20 years, looking for a theory that would unite relativity theory and quantum mechanics became one of the hottest topics in the world, in science, in physics. That's most likely the greatest enigma or riddle that has not been problem that has not been resolved in science. And in honor of Einstein's quest, I developed the computational unified field theory. Recently, it was named God's physics, but still, this computational unified field theory, God's physics paradigm, its major scientific breakthrough, which I'm speaking about today, what it is has been able to accomplish is to unify relativity theory and quantum mechanics, which is again the biggest problem, unresolved problem in science, and more so, or moreover, furthermore, what it's been able to do is what Einstein was also trying to do. And let me explain something. Einstein was able in his relativity theory to unify quite a few of the basic physical features of the universe. So, for example, space-time became a four-dimensional continuum. Space and time are now united thanks to relativity theory, Einstein's relativity theory. And then mass and time, so space-time is a four-dimensional continuum. Energy mass, the famous E equals mc square, the energy mass equivalence, which is at the basis of atomic energy and atomic nuclear energy, atomic bomb, and so forth. This is, at the basis of that is Einstein's discovery of the energy mass equivalence, or E equals mc squared. And then finally, in general relativity theory, Einstein, through Einstein's equations, he was able to show that space-time is also curved by massive objects. So massive objects curve space-time, and space-time in a sense tells massive objects what traveling pathways they would have. So on one hand, Einstein was able to unify or integrate quite a few of these physical features: space-time, energy mass, the curvature of space-time by massive objects. That's wonderful. But still, what he was seeking and what this theory accomplishes through what I call the universal computational formula. By the way, it appears at the bottom of this cover of the book is the universal computational formula, and it appears in over 50 peer-reviewed scientific articles, a special issue by global journals, another 11 articles which is just being published as we speak in one of the international scientific journals as well. So over 60 peer-reviewed articles that have been published. So at the heart of God's physics paradigm is what I call the universal computational formula, which is able to unify completely between these four basic physical features of space, energy, mass, time together. They're all integrated, and even more so, there is another major problem in science, which is the inability, it's relating to Einstein's attempt to unify between relativity theory and quantum mechanics. Today, the four basic physical forces of nature, the weak and strong electromagnetic, the strong, weak electromagnetic force, and the gravitational force, these are the four basic forces of nature. Out of these, the three first ones, the weak, strong nuclear forces and the electromagnetic force, have been united supposedly through the discovery of elementary particles and their interaction. Specific elementary particles interact, and supposedly, according to the Standard Model, that explains and unites to a certain extent the three forces, weak, strong, and electromagnetic force. But the gravitational force, which is associated with relativity theory, is left outside. So they're not unified. And again, in this new God's physics paradigm, and at the heart of this paradigm, the universal computational formula is able to accomplish tremendous things. It unifies relativity theory and quantum mechanics. It unifies completely the four basic physical four basic physical features of space, energy, mass, and time. And it also unifies between the four basic physical forces, which I spoke about now, the weak, strong electromagnetic and gravitational force. So it's a major breakthrough. I'm just going to explain in simple terms briefly how does this new God's physics paradigm is able to do so. So to understand this, let's explain in simple terms what's the difference between the old paradigm, the material causal paradigm, and the new paradigm, the God's physics paradigm. The old paradigm, remember 20th century physics, both relativity theory and quantum mechanics. The old paradigm, I call it the material causal paradigm. Material causal paradigm means that according to the old paradigm, the world, whether it's at the relativistic macroscopic level of the universe, whether it's at the microscopic subatomical realm, the universe is governed by direct interactions between cause and effect, or different particles or massive objects curving space-time. It's all cause and effect. Material interaction between physical entities that cause certain phenomena to occur. This is the old paradigm. And for example, again, according to relativity theory, the universe was created by an initial nuclear explosion or nuclear event, which then created suns, galaxies, energy, mass, expansion of the universe, etc. So this is cause and effect, and it's material interaction between material entities. In quantum mechanics, it's assumed that by the interaction of a probe subatomic element and a target, which is assumed to have a probability wave function, it's dispersed along space and time along a probability wave function. That direct interaction of the probe, probe and subatomic target elements, or target's probability wave function, causes the collapse of this target's probability wave function into a complementary single value. Again, cause and effect. So we stand at, now I need to explain, so this is the old material causal paradigm, which essentially assumes that the universe is run by cause and effect, material interactions, again, whether it's a macroscopic or microscopic level. What's the problem, you may ask? So it's important, what's the problem with the old paradigm, you may ask? And again, I elaborate on this in this beautiful book. But the basic problem is that the old paradigm, material causal paradigm, it doesn't work. And I'm quoting here and in articles one of the famous philosophers of science, Thomas Kuhn, who in 1962 wrote a book, an influential book, considered a classic in philosophy of science and understanding of how science evolves, on the structure of scientific revolutions. And Thomas Kuhn explains to us in simple terms that the science is a human endeavor, and it evolves through phases. It has a standard science or standard paradigm phase where we work within a framework, let's say like Newtonian mechanics, certain assumptions, and everything works according to this paradigm, or this mold, this framework of looking and analyzing things. Like, for example, the old paradigm of material causal physics of 20th century physics assumes that everything can be explained by cause and effect material interactions. Then there comes a phase or a point where the old paradigm doesn't work any longer. It cannot explain certain phenomena, and it also has intrinsic inconsistencies, contradictions, like between quantum mechanics and relativity theory, which I explained earlier. This is, by the way, what happened when Einstein came with his relativity theory in 1905 and then 1915, and complete validation in 1919 with his solar eclipse validation by Eddington of one of the critical predictions of Einstein's new theory, then new theory. So Einstein, when he came along, there was also a contradiction between Newtonian mechanics, classical mechanics, and Maxwellian electromagnetic theory. And there were phenomena that were major which could not be explained, such as the ether. The ether was a fine element assumed to exist. It was discarded by Einstein, but it was assumed to exist before Einstein came along. And without the ether, the old model could not exist, could not be supported. But yet scientists tried to find this ether element and they couldn't find it. Michelson, Morley, others could not find the ether element. So Einstein came along, a great scientist indeed, and said, listen, you cannot hold on, no matter how dear the old model seems and how nice it was, if it cannot explain a major phenomena, and if there is intrinsic inconsistencies, we must expand it. We must discard certain elements and allow the new paradigm, more expansive paradigm, to include the old Newtonian mechanics as a special case. And so he discarded the ether. He built relativity theory, which includes Newtonian mechanics as a special case. We stand at the exactly equivalent point. Right now, apart from the contradiction between relativity theory and quantum mechanics, which is a major problem that cannot be resolved by the old model, apart from that, there is the problem which is equivalent to the ether concept, which is called dark matter and dark energy. Dark matter and dark energy are assumed to comprise or to account for up to 95% of all the matter and energy in the universe, but yet they cannot be observed and verified directly after a lot of experiments and attempts to do so. So one of the articles, one of the 60 plus articles that have been published, relates to the discarding of the ether, the dark energy, dark matter concepts, just like Einstein discarded the ether. So the old paradigm has to be expanded. It doesn't work any longer. And Thomas Kuhn, by the way, Einstein was asked in, one time, what does he wish for his relativity theory? Fate in 100 years. Excuse me. So he was asked, what does he wish for his relativity theory fate to be in 100 years? Does he think it would stand forever? And Einstein, being very humble and also very wise, he said, no, my theory, relativity theory, would not stand forever. I only hope that relativity theory would become a special case in a broader generalization, just as Newtonian mechanics became a special case in the broader understanding, the more complete understanding of relativity theory. So we stand at that point. Science has reached that point where it must have an expansion, a new paradigm. God's physics paradigm, which I want to explain briefly, how is it able to resolve the inconsistency between relativity theory and quantum mechanics? How is it able to unify all the forces, the basic physical features, tremendous things? How is it able to do that? And so the answer is that God's physics, or the computational unified field theory, has discovered, made a major breakthrough, has discovered the existence of a singular, higher ordered, what I call universal computational principle, UCP, which is universal computational / consciousness principle. This universal computational / consciousness principle, the UCP, is assumed to compute every pixel, every point in the whole universe, throughout the whole universe. All the points of the universe are computed simultaneously, each time creating a universal frame, similar to what's happening in a film. We have frames one after the other, but we're not noticing that really it's not a continuous reality. It's being all the time created and recreated. So it's somewhat similar, and I've used the cinematic film metaphor in this new paradigm. But the idea is that we have this UCP which computes simultaneously all the pixels, all the points in the universe, and it computes it each time a universal frame of the whole universe at the incredible rate of c squared divided by Planck's constant. So that means many billions of times per second the whole universe is being computed by this UCP simultaneously. Now you may wonder, why is this important? Why is this discovery important? How does it advance science and resolve these problems that we've been speaking about? Well, it so happens to be that this new paradigm is called also acausal computation. Because if the UCP indeed computes at every billionth of a billionth of a billionth, etc., 50 zeros, that's many, many billions of times per second. So if for each billionth of a billionth, etc., of a second, each universal frame, the UCP computes all the points simultaneously, there cannot be any cause and effect between any 2 points in the universe for each frame. Moreover, the new discovery, the new paradigm, also tells us that the universe dissolves between one frame and another. It dissolves somewhat like between each 2 frames in a film we have this white light, but so in the case of God's physics, the UCP creates the whole universe, then it dissolves back into the UCP, and this is happening many, many billions of times per second. And so because during the dissolution or the dissolvement of the universe back into the UCP in between any 2 frames, obviously there's no universe, there cannot be any interaction, there cannot be any interaction between one frame and another frame, because in between the whole universe dissolves into the UCP. There cannot be any material interaction within any frame because all the points are being computed simultaneously. So this is a complete new way of looking at the universe, which essentially says there is no cause and effect. The old paradigm of material causality collapses. It's not valid any longer. So that means, by the way, that their whole understanding of the universe was not created by an initial Big Bang, because there could not have been a Big Bang in the sense of a nuclear event and some material interaction. Not in the first frame, not in the second frame, not in the third or the millionth or the billionth frame. There's no material interaction. So the Big Bang was not, the Big Bang model is negated. The universe is being created and recreated by the UCP. Moreover, because the UCP is the only element that is constant both during the frame, it computes all the pixels and all of the four basic physical features of space, energy, mass, and time. And so it exists both during the frames, computing the universe, and it exists solely without the universe in between any 2 frames. So there is what I call the computational invariance principle in this new God's physics model or paradigm, which essentially says that really, in reality, the only thing that really exists all the time is the UCP, this universal consciousness reality. The universe is a transient, is a temporary manifestation of this UCP. And so we get a new picture of the universe. Now, what I want to explain is that the way that this UCP computes the 4 basic physical features, without getting into too many details, I'll just give an example of 1 or 2 of them, and then you're going to get the idea. Imagine you're looking at a film depicting a jet plane zooming through the screen, and you're convinced that the plane has energy, right? It has velocity. But if I stop the film and I show you what really happened with the plane, you'd see that the plane was positioned here, and then here, and then here. At each consecutive frame, the object has been displaced. And the displacement, the computation of how much the jet plane has been displaced or moved or positioned in a different point in the next frame and third frame, etc., this gives you the energy of the plane. So we see that even though it seems to our naked eye that there is a plane there which is flying, it has velocity, from the perspective of the film, it doesn't have velocity. Actually, the producer placed the plane here, and then here, and then here, and this gives us the illusion, the perception, the phenomena, or the computation of the velocity or the energy of the plane. And in another example I can give, I wrote about it in this book in a beautiful example, Imagine Jesse Owens in the Olympic Games in 1939, and you see him winning all the races for the different distances, breaking for the first time 3 Olympic records. So even though he was a great athlete, if we were to slow down a film depicting his sprint, for example, you would find out that Jesse Owens, the time in the Jesse Owens film is slowing down. If you do it slow motion, time will slow down. If we were to present the same frame of Jesse Owens, for example, standing or sitting before the race, we present it for a minute, the same frame all the time, time would stop still in the film. Obviously, we're looking at the film and we have a cell phone ringing and we have our heart beating, etc. But the film itself, time is the degree of change in an object. If there's no change, there's no time. So this new theory, new God's physics paradigm, first, it's non-causal. There's no causality. There's no material causality. There is the UCR, the Universal Computational Principle or reality, that produces the universal frames, produces the universe all the time, produces, dissolves, reproduces, evolves, and it creates and arranges the frames, the evolution of the universe. That's the only real cause of how the universe evolves, not material interactions. Apart from that, we start understanding, and this is already getting to this universal computational formula here at the bottom, and the universal computational formula talks about how this UCP computes simultaneously for each pixel, each exhaustive pixel in the universe simultaneously. It computes space, energy, mass, time, and briefly, the UCP computes, for example, energy is the degree of change, displacement of an object across frames when we're looking at a series of frames. So that's energy, the degree of displacement of an object across the frame. Space is actually the degree of lack of displacement or the degree of consistency of an object across frames. Time we spoke about is the degree of change within an object. Does the object change? If it changes, the more it changes, the more time has elapsed. If it doesn't change, the time stops still. Time stop. And that's time. And mass is the opposite, is the degree of consistency. The more times an object is presented across a series of frames, which is consistently, doesn't change its composition, the greater the mass. So we find here that for the first time in science and physics, through this universal computational formula, we see this universal computational formula. It talks about the UCP computing at the rate of c squared divided by Planck's constant. So that's the 1.36 in the power of minus 50. So that's many billions of times per second. The UCP computes many billions of times per second, each time a universal frame, a frame of the whole universe. And by the way, embedded within that is a new breakthrough understanding that all the frames from the beginning of the universe till its end goal state, which I'll talk about very briefly, all the universe and all the frames exist within this UCP, except that for the future, there's multiple future depending on our moral choices. Human beings' moral choices affect the UCP's selection of certain instances and scenarios happening. But the idea is that the whole universe from the beginning till the end goal state of the universe designed by this universal computational consciousness reality, all the past, present, and multiple possible futures already exist in this UCP. And then for each frame that it computes at the incredible rate of 1.36 in the power of minus 50, many billions of times per second, it also integrates completely. It integrates space-time, energy, and mass in one formula. So that's space-time energy divided by time multiplied by mass. That's the universal computational formula. It embeds, by the way, Einstein's E equals mc squared. It embeds, as a special case, it embeds quantum mechanics, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. It includes quantum mechanics and relativity theory as special cases. It integrates between them. It unifies space, energy, mass, and time as different computations of change or lack of change, whether we look at the whole frame, whether we look at a specific object. Again, I recommend to read God's Physics book published by iUniverse.com, but because I'm trying to explain there in layman terms and more in an elaborate format. But what I want to say today is that this new universal computational formula is able to unify for the first time between, in God's physics paradigm, which this is at the heart of it, it's able to unify for the first time relativity theory and quantum mechanics through this understanding of this higher ordered singular UCP that computes simultaneously the whole universe. It's able to unify between space, energy, mass, and time. They're all embedded and integrated in this universal computational formula, which is a huge, major breakthrough. It advances beyond what Einstein was able to unify in relativity theory, as I spoke in the beginning of the lecture today. So it's unifying all four basic physical features of space, energy, mass, and time as secondary computational byproducts of the UCP's computation of every spatial pixel in the universe. It's also able to unify between the four basic forces of nature, the weak, strong electromagnetic and gravitational forces, because as I'm explaining in one of the 11 breakthrough articles published as an appendix within this book, for the first time they're published here, I'm explaining that the three forces of weak, strong, and electromagnetic represent different manifestations of the UCP's computation of energy embedded within this universal computational formula. The mass element, which is at the basis of the gravitational force, by the way, not in the same way that Einstein viewed it, because there is a cause and effect in Einstein's assumption, but still the gravitational force, so to speak, is embedded also in this universal computational formula. So the four basic forces of nature are unified in this universal computational formula. Now I want to speak about more generally, and again for the layman reader, what does that mean, this major scientific breakthrough? For the first time in science, all the forces of nature, all the basic physical features are integrated. Okay, but why is it important for us? Why did I write this book for the general public? Because I believe, and this is part of an integral part of this theory, I believe that science stands at a pivotal turning point. According to this theory, the only driving force that's driving the universe from its inception till the end state goal of the universal computational principle or universal conscious reality is the direction and the goal of this universal computational reality. In a sense, physics, biology, psychology, all the different sciences are unified under this new understanding that God's physics really discovers that the universe does not exist as a reality separate from this universal consciousness reality. In religious terms, we would call it God. Scientific terms, we call it the universal computational principle or universal consciousness reality. But it's the same principle. And so, for the first time in science, we realize that the world does not exist as an independent material entity. It actually exists very transiently. It exists only temporally. Every billionth of a second, it's being produced by this universal conscious reality, dissolved, reproduced, and then evolved. And so we reach the inevitable conclusion that what's driving, first, the universe is not a physical entity, it's actually a manifestation of this universal conscious reality. And this universal conscious reality has created the universe with a specific scenario and specific progression in mind, leading from inanimate matter, atoms, planets, galaxies, through the evolution of animate plants, animals, human beings, and then the ultimate state of humanity, which leads the whole universe to this, what I call the Geula state. The Geula state, that's a term in Jewish tradition, but science is now using the same terminology. The Geula state is a state in which Science and humanity will recognize, and is starting to recognize, the sole reality of this universal consciousness reality. This universal consciousness reality, again in religious terms it's called God, but this universal consciousness reality possesses certain characteristics such as goodwill, the wish and the action of creating life, sustaining life, taking care of the needs of all of life, plants, animals, human beings, etc. The goodwill hypothesis. Not only that, this universal conscious reality from the beginning of the universe is driving the universe towards what seems as an expansion of the consciousness, of the realization of the oneness of life. So from inanimate to animate plants, animals, human beings, and the Geula state. The Geula state is where science is now reaching and opening the eyes of humanity, that there's really one reality, and that reality is this universal conscious reality, or God. That one reality is embedded with a moral principle, and one of the fascinating things and discoveries in this new paradigm is the realization that we, human beings, each individual human being, by our moral choices, we are affecting the universal consciousness reality's selection of one of multiple possible futures for each one of us. If an individual is choosing to act morally towards another human being and help him or her, that individual would reap the same fruits, would experience one of the multiple futures in which he would be remunerated for his actions, and vice versa, of course. And the whole universe is progressing based on the universal consciousness realities driving of the universe towards this Geula state. The Geula state is a state in which there's complete moral, spiritual, and even physical perfection. There's no death. There is complete peace and harmony. And there is a recognition and, in fact, a deep sense of gratitude and awe towards that universal consciousness reality. So we stand, no doubt, at a major crossroad, major breakthrough in science. It's a major scientific discovery, major scientific breakthrough, where the new God's physics paradigm, and again I encourage people to read the book, because I made great efforts to try and explain this beautiful, profound new theory of 21st century physics to the layman reader. But the idea is that we stand at the beginning of a major revolution in science, where Einstein's vision of unifying the four basic physical features of space, energy, mass, and time, four basic physical forces, the strong, weak electromagnetic and gravitational forces, quantum mechanics, relativity theory, all are unified. And moreover, this new paradigm, God's physics paradigm, tells us that the universe is purposeful, that this universal conscious reality cares about our moral choices and is evolving and taking care of and driving the universe towards that perfected Geula state. So it's a very exciting discovery, and again, we live at a historic time where this new discovery of science is really advancing humanity, and the book was written for the general public, for the layman reader, and for humanity at large to realize this profound new change in science. Thank you.